Alan Matheson Turing was born on June 23, 1912, in Maida Vale, London, into a middle-class British family. His father, Julius Turing, served in the Indian Civil Service, while his mother, Ethel Sarah, came from a family with a strong educational background. From childhood, Alan showed unusual curiosity and intelligence. He taught himself to read within weeks, solved puzzles far beyond his age, and developed a fascination with numbers, logic, and patterns in nature. When he entered Sherborne School in Dorset, his teachers quickly recognized his brilliance, but criticized his lack of interest in traditional subjects like Latin and literature. He preferred spending hours experimenting with chemical reactions or solving mathematical problems that even his instructors found difficult. One teacher described him as a problem to the system, brilliant but uninterested in conformity. Despite this, Turing's natural intellect shone. He developed early concepts of pattern recognition, often linking math with real-world systems. During this period, he met Christopher Morcom, a fellow student who shared his passion for science. Their friendship deeply influenced him, and Morcom's sudden death from tuberculosis left Turing devastated. He later described this loss as a turning point that shaped his lifelong interest in understanding the human mind and artificial intelligence, the mechanics of thought itself. In 1931, Turing entered King's College, Cambridge, where he excelled in mathematics and logic, graduating with top honors. By 24, he had been elected a Fellow of the college, an extraordinary achievement. His work at Cambridge laid the foundation for the mathematical ideas that would soon revolutionize both computer science and wartime intelligence, though no one, not even Turing himself, could yet imagine how profoundly his logical mind would change the course of history.
Alan sat in the dimly lit hut at Bletchley Park, surrounded by stacks of coded papers, cigarette smoke curling in the air and the faint hum of machines. The walls were covered in charts, letters, and complex equations. It looked like chaos, but in Alan's mind, there was a pattern waiting to be found. Every day, hundreds of German messages came through, encrypted by the Enigma, a machine that could change its code 150 quintillion times. It was, by all logic, unbreakable. But Alan Turing didn't believe in the impossible. He began sketching something entirely new, a machine that could think faster than any human, that could test combinations tirelessly, without emotion or fatigue. He called it the bomb. His fellow codebreakers doubted him at first. Some whispered that Turing's obsession with logic had made him lose touch with reality. Others simply couldn't imagine a machine doing the work of men. But Alan wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. He was trying to save lives. Days turned into nights as he worked alone, tinkering with gears, wires, and relays. When the prototype finally clicked to life, the sound was unlike anything they'd heard, a rhythmic, mechanical heartbeat of logic. Each tick meant a possible crack in the Nazi code. Each whirring rotation meant a soldier's life might be saved. Turing leaned back, exhausted, his eyes red but burning with hope. If it works, we might just change the course of this war. Around him, the others watched, uncertain whether to believe or not. But deep down, everyone felt it. Something extraordinary was happening in that small, smoky hut. The world was about to meet its first thinking machine. The war outside raged with bombs, tanks, and soldiers. But inside Bletchley Park, a different kind of war was being fought. A war of logic, patience, and intellect. Alan Turing and his small team of mathematicians, engineers, and linguists were the soldiers of silence.
Each morning, the Enigma messages arrived, intercepted German communications full of secrets, written in incomprehensible code. Every evening, those messages had to be cracked before the Nazis changed the code again at midnight. It was a cruel race against time. Each failure meant thousands of lives lost at sea. British ships were being sunk mercilessly by German U-boats, guided by Enigma-encoded orders. The commanders demanded answers, the military grew restless, and the pressure crushed everyone's spirit. But Alan sat there calmly, his mind sharper than ever. To him, the Enigma wasn't just a machine, it was a challenge, a puzzle meant to be solved by reason, not emotion. He would stare at the endless streams of letters, meaningless to others, but to Alan, they were alive with patterns. He started seeing repetition in chaos, rhythm in randomness. Slowly, he began programming his machine, the bomb, to search for clues. Each rotor click inside that machine was a spark of progress, a whisper that the tide might turn soon. His colleagues worked beside him, often doubting, often exhausted. Some even mocked his unshakable faith and logic. But Alan's persistence didn't break. He would say quietly, "The machine doesn't fail. We just haven't asked it the right question yet." And then, one foggy morning, something happened. The machine slowed, clicked, differently, and stopped. The impossible had happened. Alan's machine had found a pattern, a glimpse into the German war mind. For the first time, they were one step ahead of Hitler.
The dawn mist hung low over Bletchley Park as Alan Turing stood beside the towering, humming metal giant he had built, the bomb. It wasn't beautiful by ordinary standards. Its wires tangled like vines, its rotors spun with deafening rhythm, and its lights blinked like a storm trapped inside steel. But to Alan, it was the purest form of beauty, a creation of thought, a machine that could think faster than any human mind. Every dial, every relay, every switch was a soldier in the war of intelligence. The bomb wasn't just built to decode Enigma. It was designed to think logically. For the first time in human history, a machine was performing reasoning, following patterns and making decisions. Many at Bletchley Park didn't fully understand what Alan was creating. To them, it was just a massive calculator. But to Alan, it was something alive, a partner in the fight against tyranny. As the machine began its run, the entire room filled with mechanical thunder. The gears rotated in perfect rhythm, the clacks echoed through the hall, and paper tapes unspooled like veins of information. Hours turned into days. Then, one evening, a young codebreaker shouted the impossible had happened. The bomb had decoded a message. It was from the German Navy, detailing the coordinates of an upcoming U-boat ambush. That single message, cracked in time, saved hundreds of Allied sailors. Commanders were stunned. Churchill himself would later call the codebreakers the geese who laid the golden eggs and never cackled. Alan stood silently as everyone cheered. The machine had worked. But deep down, he wasn't celebrating. Not yet. He knew the war of machines had only begun. Enigma changed daily, and every victory meant a harder puzzle tomorrow. But the world had just taken its first step toward the age of computers.
By mid-1942, the war of machines had evolved into a war of minds. The Germans upgraded their Enigma machines, adding new rotors and random plugboard settings. What had once taken Turing's Bombay hours to solve now took days, time the Allies could not afford. Convoys were being lost in the Atlantic, merchant ships vanishing beneath waves of torpedoes. Every hour without decrypted intelligence meant more lives gone. Alan Turing refused to surrender. He worked night and day in his small Bletchley Park office,
chain-smoking cigarettes, scribbling equations on notepads, and feeding new ideas into his growing system. He was pale, unshaven and restless, consumed by thought. The others noticed he often muttered to himself, trying to imagine how the enemy thought, not just what they wrote. Then he realized something extraordinary. The Germans, though meticulous, were still human. Their habits, routines, and even laziness could be used against them. They often started messages with predictable words like weather, or Heil Hitler. Using these cribs, Alan refined the Bombay's logic to spot patterns faster. The next time the machine ran, it cracked an Enigma key in record time. The decrypted messages revealed wolf pack formations, clusters of U-boats waiting for Allied convoys. Armed with this intelligence, the Royal Navy rerouted ships and set traps. Within weeks, the U-boat losses began to rise sharply. For the first time in years, the tide turned in the Atlantic. The Allies could move supplies safely, and the German Navy started to lose its grip on the seas. Alan didn't stand on a battlefield or pull a trigger, but his calculations had saved thousands, maybe millions. He wasn't called a hero. He was still a secret. Yet in that quiet room filled with wires and logic, he was fighting Hitler's war on a different front, the invisible one.
By 1943, Alan Turing's relentless pursuit reached its peak. The bomb machines were now running day and night, loud mechanical beasts clattering in synchronized rhythm, decoding thousands of intercepted messages. What began as one man's theory had grown into a network of hundreds of analysts, mathematicians, and women from the Women's Royal Naval Service who operated the bombs tirelessly. The air inside Bletchley Park buzzed with electricity and urgency. Then came the most critical moment of the war. The Battle of the Atlantic was hanging by a thread. Allied ships carrying fuel, ammunition, and food were being sunk faster than they could be replaced. Every code delay meant more sailors dying in the freezing ocean. The Enigma had once again changed, a fourth rotor added, making it exponentially harder to break. Panic rippled through British intelligence. Alan sat alone that night, studying endless columns of letters. The noise of typewriters, ticking clocks, and whirring machines faded around him. He saw patterns no one else could, recurring messages, small quirks in how German operators repeated certain letters. It was enough. He adjusted the bomb's logic to account for this human error. When the machine stopped spinning, the decoded message appeared. It revealed exact coordinates of U-boat positions. The breakthrough allowed Allied ships to avoid ambush and launch counterattacks. In the following weeks, Germany lost more submarines than in any previous month of the war. The unbreakable Enigma was finally broken beyond repair. The codebreakers celebrated quietly, bound by secrecy. Winston Churchill later called Bletchley Park's work the geese that laid the golden eggs and never cackled. Alan Turing didn't shout or smile. He simply wrote one line in his notebook: "Victory through logic." He had just shortened the war by years.
The success at Bletchley Park remained one of the most closely guarded secrets of World War II. Despite helping the Allies turn the tide, Alan Turing's name never appeared in any wartime reports or victory speeches. To the public, the battles were won by tanks, planes, and soldiers, not by the silent minds working behind locked doors. Every person at Bletchley had signed the official Secrets Act, meaning they could tell no one, not even their families, what they had done. Turing returned home after the war, walking past people celebrating in the streets, hearing cheers for generals and pilots, but he remained invisible. His genius had saved millions, yet not a soul knew his role. Even inside the government, only a handful understood how deep his influence had been. The decoding of Enigma shortened the war by at least 2 years, historians later estimated, sparing countless lives. But to Turing, there was no parade, no medal, no applause. Just quiet relief that logic and persistence had prevailed over violence. In 1945, he began working for the National Physical Laboratory, turning his wartime experience towards something entirely new: machines that could think. His vision was decades ahead of its time, a programmable computer that could solve problems on its own. But bureaucracy slowed progress, and his ideas were often dismissed as impractical. Meanwhile, Turing's personal life became increasingly difficult. In a Britain still intolerant of homosexuality, his private truth was something he had to hide as carefully as the codes he once broke. Alan often sat alone, sketching diagrams for machines the world wasn't ready for, his mind still spinning with possibilities. He had helped win the greatest war in history, yet peace offered him no victory of his own.
By the early 1950s, Alan Turing was no longer a wartime hero, but a civilian mathematician quietly working on computing and artificial intelligence. He had proposed the Turing test, a bold idea suggesting that a machine could be called intelligent if its answers were indistinguishable from a human's. Yet, while his mind continued to explore the boundaries of logic and consciousness, his private life soon brought him into grave danger. In 1952, Turing's world collapsed. After reporting a burglary at his Manchester home, he admitted to the police that he had a relationship with another man, a fact that, under British law at the time, was a criminal offense. Instead of being celebrated for helping defeat Nazi Germany, he was charged with gross indecency. The government that had once depended on his brilliance now turned on him. Offered a choice between imprisonment and chemical castration through estrogen injections, Turing chose the latter, believing it would allow him to continue his research. The side effects were brutal. The treatments altered his body, drained his energy, and took away his focus. Colleagues noticed he became increasingly withdrawn, though he continued to work on mathematical biology and early computer designs. His security clearance was revoked, cutting him off from the government projects he had once led. The irony was unbearable. The man who had broken the Enigma code was now treated as a national threat. Through it all, Turing never lashed out. He continued to think, to write, to imagine machines that could one day understand and create. But behind that intellect was deep pain, the betrayal of a nation he had saved.
In June 1954, Alan Turing was found dead in his Wilmslow home at just 41 years old. A half-eaten apple lay beside his bed. The official cause was cyanide poisoning. Many believed he had injected or dipped the apple in the poison before eating it, a quiet, symbolic act that echoed his fascination with the fairy tale of Snow White. The verdict was suicide. Others, including some historians, have debated whether it might have been an accident from his home experiments with chemicals. But either way, the world had lost one of its greatest minds. At the time of his death, few truly understood what Turing had done for the war effort. His work at Bletchley Park remained classified until decades later, meaning the public knew him only as a disgraced scientist, not as the man who had shortened World War II by years and saved millions of lives. It wasn't until the 1970s that documents began to emerge, revealing the full scale of his achievements. Historians and former codebreakers spoke openly about how his bomb machine cracked the German Enigma code and turned the tide against the Nazis. By then, it was too late for Turing himself, but not for his legacy. In 2009, the British government formally apologized for his treatment, and in 2013, Queen Elizabeth II granted him a posthumous royal pardon. His face now appears on the £50 banknote, and his name stands as a symbol of logic, courage, and the right to think differently. Alan Turing's story reminds the world that genius often comes with great sacrifice. A man condemned in his lifetime became, decades later, the very definition of a national hero. The mathematician who broke the code, built the computer age, and paid the ultimate price for simply being himself.